A few years ago, I had one of those mornings that stays with you. I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, still half asleep, with that harsh overhead light, making everything look worse. And for a moment, I genuinely did not recognize the woman looking back at me. My face looked swollen. My eyes seemed tired in a way that sleep alone could not fix, and my body felt heavier than it used to. What unsettled me most was not just the way I looked, but the feeling that something had changed quietly and completely, almost without my noticing when it began. At first, I blamed menopause for all of it. I blamed it for the thicker waist, for the broken sleep, for the mood swings, for the low energy, for the strange anxiety that seemed to come out of nowhere, and for the growing sense that my body was no longer responding to me in the way it had for most of my life. And to be fair, menopause was part of the story. Hormonal change is real. The drop in estrogen is real. The shift in sleep, stress, body composition, and recovery is all very real. But what I slowly came to understand was that menopause was not acting alone. Something else in my daily life was intensifying everything, and it was doing it so quietly that I almost missed it. What made this so hard to see is that it did not look dramatic. It was not some obvious pattern of overeating or a diet built entirely around junk food. It was the sweet coffee in the morning that felt harmless. It was the flavored yogurt that looked healthy on the label. It was the cereal bar eaten in the car, the juice that sounded cleaner than soda, the small afternoon treat that felt deserved after a stressful day, and the bite of something sweet after dinner. Because I was tired and wanted comfort. None of those things seemed like a big deal on their own. They looked ordinary. They looked manageable. They looked like everyday life. But when those little habits were added together day after day, they were creating a level of blood sugar instability my body no longer handled the way it once had. That is really what this video is about. Not the idea that sugar is the only problem, and not the fantasy that menopause can be solved with one magical rule. Menopause is a major biological transition, and there is no honest way to talk about it without acknowledging that. But there are everyday habits that can make this phase far harder than it needs to be, and for many women, sugar is one of the most overlooked. If your sleep has become fragile, if your belly feels more stubborn than ever, if your face looks puffier, if your cravings are stronger, if your energy is less reliable, or if your body feels softer and weaker despite the fact that you are trying, there may be more connecting those symptoms than you realize. One of the first places this tends to show up is in mood, stress, and sleep. And for many women, this is where the suffering becomes part of daily life. You wake up tired even after spending a full night in bed. You feel reasonably okay for a little while. Then, by late morning, your energy starts fading. Your patience is shorter than it used to be. Small things get under your skin more easily. By the afternoon, your body is asking for relief, and relief often looks like something quick: coffee, bread, chocolate, something sweet, something that gives you a little lift. Then the evening comes, and instead of feeling settled, your body feels tired, while your mind seems strangely alert. You lie in bed exhausted but unable to fully switch off, and you start wondering why your body feels like it is working against you. That pattern is often treated as if it were purely emotional, as if a woman is simply becoming more sensitive or less resilient. But there is often a physical layer underneath it. When you eat in a way that causes blood sugar to rise quickly and fall quickly, your body is constantly being pushed out of balance and forced to recover. For a short time, sugar can feel like relief. It can create a sense of reward, comfort, or energy, especially when you are already tired. But the rise does not last, and when the drop comes, it can leave behind irritability, shakiness, fatigue, brain fog, and a renewed desire for something that will make you feel better fast. When that cycle repeats several times in a day, your nervous system never really gets a chance to settle. Menopause tends to magnify that effect because the body is already under more pressure than before. Sleep is often lighter. Stress tolerance is often lower. Recovery is less automatic. Hormones that once helped create stability are no longer buffering the body in the same way. What might have felt like a small dietary issue years earlier can begin to feel like complete internal chaos during this stage of life. That is one reason so many women find themselves waking in the middle of the night with their minds racing and their bodies feeling strangely alert. They assume it is simply hormones or anxiety, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it is also a body reacting to instability that has been building quietly all day. The next area where this often becomes painfully visible is belly fat. And this is where many women begin to feel not just frustrated, but betrayed. Weight gain around the middle during menopause does not feel like ordinary weight gain. It feels specific. It changes the way clothes fit, the way the body looks in photos, the way a woman sees herself in the mirror. What makes it so emotionally difficult is that many women feel they are not doing anything extreme to deserve it. In fact, some are eating less than they used to. They may feel like they are trying harder than they did 10 years earlier, only to find that their midsection is changing in a way that feels unfamiliar and discouraging. Part of that change is clearly hormonal. Lower estrogen can influence where the body tends to store fat, often shifting more of it toward the abdominal area. But hormonal change does not happen in isolation. When it is combined with repeated blood sugar spikes, poor sleep, chronic stress, low protein intake, and gradual muscle loss, the body is receiving signal after signal that pushes it towards storage rather than balance. This is why it becomes so discouraging to reduce the conversation to calories alone. Two women can eat similar amounts of food and have very different experiences depending on their sleep quality, stress load, muscle mass, insulin sensitivity, and the overall quality of what they are eating. Menopause changes the terrain, and blood sugar instability often makes that terrain much harder to navigate. That distinction matters because too many women see the change in their waistline and assume it means they have become lazy, weak, or careless. In reality, the body they are living in is not operating under the same conditions it once was. A body that is sleeping badly, carrying less muscle, living under more stress, and being pushed through repeated energy crashes is not going to respond the way it did at 30. That body does not need more shame. It needs a different strategy. It needs more nourishment, more stability, more protein, better recovery, and fewer habits that keep sending it back into the same hormonal stress loop. Another way this pattern often shows up is through inflammation, although many women do not use that word at first. They simply know that they feel off. Their rings fit tighter than they used to. Their face looks puffier in the morning. Their skin seems duller. Their joints feel stiffer when they get out of bed. Their body feels heavier even when the scale has barely changed. Their energy feels flatter, and they may have the unsettling feeling that they have aged very quickly in a short amount of time. Because those changes often happen gradually, they are easy to normalize. A woman starts telling herself that this is probably just what getting older feels like. But that explanation is not always the full story. Sometimes what she is feeling is a body under constant, low-grade irritation. Menopause itself can increase vulnerability to inflammation. And when that is layered on top of a pattern of frequent sugar, processed foods, poor sleep, and chronic stress, the body can begin to feel as though it is carrying far more strain than it should. This is one reason so many women invest heavily in external fixes. They buy creams, anti-aging products, supplements, and all kinds of quick promises, hoping to restore brightness to the face and energy to the body. There is nothing wrong with wanting to care for your appearance, but there is a limit to what external care can do when the body is being fed in a way that keeps it swollen, unstable, and overworked from the inside. Sometimes the glow a woman is chasing is not hiding in a better product. Sometimes it begins with better meals, steadier energy, better sleep, more protein, and less daily chaos in the way the body is being fueled. That is not a glamorous answer, but it is often a very real one. A body that feels less inflamed tends to move more comfortably, recover more easily, think more clearly, and feel less heavy from the inside out. And when a woman begins to feel physically more comfortable in her own body, her entire relationship with food, movement, and self-care can begin to shift. Cravings and constant hunger are another part of this story. And this is where so many women become incredibly hard on themselves. They start asking why they seem hungry all the time, why evenings are so difficult, why they keep wanting something sweet even when they know it will not help in the long run. Because these moments often feel emotional, they are easy to interpret as failures of discipline. But the body does not experience them as moral failures. It experiences them as signals. A woman who starts the day with too little protein and too much sugar, pushes through poor sleep, relies on caffeine to hold herself together, and eats meals that never quite satisfy her, is creating a situation where her body will eventually ask for fast relief. This is one reason so many women feel relatively controlled during the day, and then completely undone by evening. They may spend the day trying to be careful, eating small portions, choosing foods that seem light, and ignoring hunger in the hope of being good. But by the time the day is ending, they are mentally exhausted and physically undersupported. The result is not a mysterious collapse in willpower. It is often the predictable response of a body that has not been receiving steady nourishment. She starts searching for comfort in the kitchen, going back for one more bite, looking for the thing that will make her feel calm, rewarded, or soothed. Then the guilt comes in, and the guilt itself adds more stress, which often makes the same pattern more likely to repeat the next day. What many women need in that moment is not more self-criticism, but more stability. They need meals that actually satisfy them, enough protein to help regulate hunger, more real food, fewer cycles of deprivation and rebound, and a routine that does not leave them running on little bursts of false energy all day long. When the body begins to feel safer and more supported, appetite often becomes less chaotic. Hunger becomes easier to read. Cravings become less intense. Food starts to feel less like a battle and more like part of a strategy that actually helps. This brings us to what may be the deepest and most overlooked part of all: muscle loss, and the slower metabolism that often follows it. So much of the conversation around menopause becomes centered on fat, especially belly fat, that women forget to ask what protects them from gaining fat more easily in the first place. One of the most important answers is muscle. Muscle is not just about appearance. It supports strength, balance, blood sugar control, independence, and metabolic health. It helps the body remain capable and resilient. But menopause makes muscle easier to lose, and that matters far more than most women are told. This is why some women say they do not just feel heavier, they feel weaker. Carrying groceries feels different. Getting up from the floor feels different. Going upstairs feels different. The body feels less powerful than it did a few years earlier. And that change can be surprisingly emotional. When muscle is gradually declining, metabolism often slows with it. A woman may keep focusing all her attention on the fat she sees in the mirror, while never realizing that part of what has changed is the amount of metabolically active tissue underneath it. In that situation, simply trying to eat less often misses the point. The real need is not just to reduce, but to rebuild support. This is one of the biggest mistakes women are pushed into during menopause. They become so focused on getting smaller that they forget to become stronger. They chase restriction instead of preservation. They cut food instead of supporting the very tissue that would help their body stay metabolically healthier. Over time, that often leads to the worst of both worlds: less strength, less resilience, less muscle, more fatigue, and more softness in all the places they least want it. This is why the conversation about menopause has to be larger than weight. It has to include body composition, strength, blood sugar stability, recovery, and the long-term health of the body as a whole. So, what does all of this mean in practical terms? It means many women in menopause do not need another punishing plan. They need fewer things destabilizing them throughout the day. They need to take an honest look at the habits that have become routine, but are no longer serving them well. They may need to rely less on sweet drinks, processed snacks, and meals that never truly satisfy them. They may need more protein, more fiber, more real food, more consistent meals, more sleep support, and more resistance training. They may need to stop treating their symptoms as personal failures and start seeing them as information. What helps most is rarely an extreme solution. More often, it is a quieter and steadier way of supporting the body. A woman may feel very different simply by beginning the day with a substantial meal instead of sugar and quick carbohydrates. She may notice a real shift when her afternoon snack no longer sends her into another crash an hour later. She may begin to feel more stable when sweet drinks and highly processed foods are no longer woven into the background of everyday life. And in time, she may feel even stronger when she starts incorporating resistance training, walking more regularly, and protecting sleep as something essential rather than optional. One of the hardest emotional parts of this phase is that many women slowly stop trusting their own bodies. Hunger feels less predictable. The mirror feels less familiar. Energy becomes unreliable. Routines that once seemed effective no longer produce the same results. Over time, that creates a much deeper kind of discouragement, because it is not only the body that feels different, but the relationship a woman has with her body. She begins to doubt what she is feeling, what she is seeing, and whether anything she does will make a difference. That is why understanding matters so much. Once a woman sees that her body is not betraying her, but responding to a new hormonal reality that requires a different kind of care, she can stop fighting herself and start responding more wisely. That shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of asking what is wrong with me, she can begin asking, what does my body need now that it did not need in the same way before? That is a far more useful question. The body you have today may not respond to the same habits that worked 10 or 20 years ago, and that is not weakness. It is not failure. It is biology. Once you accept that, you can begin to build a strategy that fits the stage of life you are actually in. And when women start doing that, the first signs of progress are not always dramatic. They may notice that their face looks less puffy in the morning, that their mind feels calmer, that cravings in the evening have softened, that they are waking with steadier energy, or that they feel physically stronger during the day. They may realize that the constant self-blame which used to follow every glance in the mirror has started to loosen its grip. That is often how real change begins, quietly, steadily, and without the emotional violence that so many women have been taught to direct at themselves. If there is one thing I want you to remember from this, it is that menopause absolutely changes the body, but unstable eating patterns, especially too much sugar and too little nourishment, may be making that transition much harder than it needs to be. What most women need is not more punishment. They need more clarity, more stability, more nourishment, more strength, and more intelligent support. When the body begins to receive that support consistently, sleep can improve, cravings can calm down, energy can become more reliable, strength can return, and even the relationship a woman has with her own body can begin to heal. Because the hardest part of this season is not always what a woman sees in the mirror. Sometimes the hardest part is no longer feeling at home inside her own body. The good news is that this can change. Not overnight, and not through magic, but through understanding and through better support. The body is not broken. It is adapting. It is asking for a different kind of care than it needed before. And once a woman sees that clearly, she can begin responding in a way that is far kinder and far more effective. So if you have been feeling lost, discouraged, puffy, exhausted, or frustrated by a body that no longer seems to respond the way it once did, let this be your reminder that you are not imagining it, you are not weak, and you are not failing. Your body may simply be asking for a new strategy, and one of the most important places to begin may be by taking a serious look at the sugar and instability that have become so normal in everyday life that they no longer stand out. Not from fear and not from punishment, but from wisdom. Because when you stop making this phase harder than it needs to be, your body often begins to respond in ways that feel deeply meaningful. Sleep becomes less chaotic. Energy becomes steadier. Cravings become quieter. Strength begins to return. Your waistline may become easier to manage. And perhaps most importantly, there is a growing sense that your body is starting to feel like yours again.